lovely friends, Talking Fantasy Podcast. My name is Charles, and with me today, as always, is my lifelong friend and co-host, Dylan.
I'm ready to talk some fantasy with my friend again, Charles.
Yes,
He's back
I'm
again.
back, everybody. Check it out. I have returned. Thank you all for your patience, and it's good to be back. And Dylan, nice job holding down the fort while I was away. I appreciate that.
Thank you. I mean, it was all part of the generous Friends Talking Fantasy paternity package.
So I've heard.
Create at least whatever amount of episodes I created, let's say 4 or 5, and then upon your return, you would regain the first word in in each episode and the final word.
That's right. I always have to speak first and last, and all of that is part of my contract. But you held down the fort nicely. We missed the music and we missed the borders and everything. But at the end of the day, it's all about so that was
unfiltered, no borders. That was the tone of the show. Oh, you mean the physical borders on the YouTube? Okay, gotcha.
Real raw stuff there, and no, it was fun. It was fun to listen as like a fan. I was so not involved in the episodes that you're doing that it would pop up on my notifications, and I would be surprised, and I would listen. So that was fun experience, and thank you to everyone that came in and helped Dylan out. Even Spencer, our pod, everyone that came on for that. That was really nice.
Yeah, that was really appreciated. And Charles, you checked out the solo episode too.
I did check out the solo episode, and I was very impressed you were able to go an hour and like 5 minutes solo.
Were you surprised, though? You say impressed. Were you surprised?
No, not at all. And I even think in like the beginning of the episode, you were like, I'm going to try and keep this, pretty short. We'll see how long I can go. And I'm like, this guy definitely passed an hour. And I checked the time and I was like, yeah, of course. I don't think people realize that, the editing process, the getting to the next topic, the closing, it's still one of our shortest episodes, though. I'll give you that by a long shot. But it was still very impressive. You then that's the natural talent that you are to hold down the fort on your own for an hour. It takes a very special skill. Sure.
I feel like those are measured words. You're like, how do I speak to special?
No, I enjoyed it.
Special skill.
I enjoyed it, Dylan. I had a great time. And speaking of great times, I wasn't just doing nothing while I was on paternity leave and, raising an infant child.
A newborn child,
but I should say I wasn't, not reading. In fact, fun fact about being a first-time parent with a newborn baby is you end up like in these scenarios where you're just like holding a baby while it goes to sleep for like an hour, and having audiobooks has really kind of unlocked a whole new thing of reading. I have read in the past 3 months like 12 plus books.
Yes.
And so that's pretty good for me. That's a lot. That's a high volume.
I think that's a lot for just about anyone. Except those people you see on Goodreads that are like setting their goal at the start of the year and they're like, I'll do 200. And it's like, oh, geez.
Right?
We're not those people.
We're not those people, but, I did do pretty well. And
you did.
So I thought, we could get into a little bit of that. But I guess the other thing is if you haven't checked it out already, I think this episode will be out by the time this comes out for sure, is our cover reveal with Christian Cameron and with Whale Song. So that was a lot of fun. That was my official return to the show that we filmed that a couple days ago. And That was really cool. So I had not known even what a cover reveal was. I mean, I could guess what it was, but I was like, how does that work?
You're a
And
smart guy.
yeah, so we
You put
figured
it
it.
together.
Well, we figured it out. We had it wasn't without its rough starts and its learning curves, but we figured out how to reveal that cover, and the cover's been revealed. So definitely go and check that out. Right, Dylan?
I think in the release of this episode, timeline wise, that was like 3 or 4 weeks ago.
Yeah.
So this is not exactly. I know it happened for it hasn't even occurred for us while we're recording this,
Right.
but it yes, I believe it happened like 3 or 4 weeks ago. Who knows what kind of things have occurred since then in our beautiful world in the
Right.
last few weeks. But you can go see this new gorgeous cover if you go back. I'll also say, Charles,
Mm.
I think you did not thank Derek in your list of people
Oh
that you were
yeah, well
thanking for
because
their
that
roles
episode
in.
I haven't listened to that episode yet because it's not even out yet. I just know that you recorded that, so I'm gonna
Yeah,
reserve my thanks until I hear it and make sure I did a good
as you
job.
should.
Yeah. Yep.
Derek was the first ever guest in Friends Talking Fantasy history that when an attempt to wrap up the show was occurring, he went, wait, 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 I want to tell you, like, I got one more thing. Which is, he had that lifelong friend built up credit where he
Yeah.
was like, well, I can do whatever I want.
He
Which,
can, yeah, he can.
yes.
So I'm excited to listen to that one actually, but I haven't. I guess I can say because this will be weeks later. But you talk about the movie Superman, which I have not seen.
Yeah.
So hopefully, by the time this comes
Yeah,
out,
go watch
I
it.
will have seen Superman and I will have watched the. Then I can thank Derek appropriately. So stay tuned to see if thanks is forthcoming.
Hmm.
So that's exciting. The other thing about having an infant is it's a lot harder to go to the movies. So I've seen 0 movies in the movie theater, but I've read 12 books. So go figure. That's how it works. Um, and yeah, we are so back again, and that's what this episode's all about. We're coming back, catching up. Um, I have a bunch of books I could go through if we just want to do it that way. Unless there's any other topical fantasy things we wanna bring up on the show.
Just more advice for newborn fathers of
Mm.
newborn uh, babies.
Get the
Just
library
what
app.
have you? Yeah, your wisdom. We want wisdom here, Charles. What have you learned?
Yes. Well, while raising the heiress, the heir
Mm,
apparent of the show and my house, I would highly recommend getting the Libby app for your public library, guys. I mean, that is the way to go for sure. Most of these books, some of them I read physically, but anything else was borrowed through the library, and all the audiobooks were borrowed through the library. So um, I think the only thing I spent money on was The Devils. I bought the book,
mm.
but
Did you
everything.
get the physical
Did I get
of
the
the
physical?
Devil's?
Mm,
Oh yeah, that's good.
is
I
this
only
it?
have it on Kindle, but I will actually. Oh, yeah. I think my partner she got the physical, so I
Yeah,
do believe we
I
have a
know she
copy.
does because she showed it to me, and that was when I was like, "Oh dang, I gotta get myself a copy," because it's a
Yeah,
beautiful
it's a good
book.
looking book.
Yeah, it's got all these wonderful like full color illustrations. Like, oh.
Yeah, they're
We'll get
nice.
into that, but yeah, everything else was borrowed from the library, so that's a big one, and that's about it. You know, everything else.
Just get the Libby app, figure the rest out on your
Yep, yep, yep.
own.
Not too bad. Not too bad. Piece of cake. So, Dylan, how was your reading experience? I know you've been busy keeping the show afloat, but it sounds like you had
And
a couple
moving to Miami.
and moving to Miami. So,
Yes.
I know that there's some things still on the TBR there, but anything cooking lately?
Uh, Cooking, well, I'll say now I feel because we're weeks in the future and people have been hearing me talk about that I was reading The Devils for a
Mm.
while. I did, I did finally finish The
Oh,
Devils,
good.
like for those listening, at least like a few weeks ago. So, um, yeah, it. So we can talk. I think at some point we'll do an episode on
Yeah,
that
yeah.
for sure.
We'll
So
do a
I
full
finished The
episode on.
Devils. Um, I read Legends and Lattes.
Oh,
I
nice.
read. I read Red Seas Under Red Skies, of course. That was a while ago, and that was closing the loop on our last friends pitching fantasy. So that episode will be coming too, because you read that as well. I think that's pretty much what I've actually read during the hiatus. I'm gonna take a quick look at the old Goodreads. But Charles, do you have a list of
I do have a
the
list, but before I get into it, I want to get your quick reaction to Legends and Lattes because I had read
oh
that on our last hiatus,
yes.
and and I had
Which is an
told
amazing
you,
statement.
which was not that long ago.
Yes.
So I had read that, and I remember telling you like I was, it was already a really like well established, popular, successful book, and it surpassed my expectations. I was wondering what how this book um, met, didn't meet, exceeded your expectations as well. Going by the time you finished it.
Yeah, I think I would have had a pretty similar reaction to what you had
Hmm.
when I read it, had you not read it first.
Yeah,
Because we have pretty similar taste in fantasy, and I'll say I kind of. I don't know if I'd been avoiding Legends and Lattes. That's maybe a little stronger than what was happening, but I just wasn't seeking it out because cozy fantasy seems quite a bit different than what we typically read. We're big epic fantasy, grimdark fantasy,
hmm,
kind of readers military fantasy, and then Legends and Lattes, the whole pitch is like, oh, there aren't really stakes, and
yeah,
they're kind of just opening up a coffee shop, and there's a romance story to it, and it's like I I ended up really enjoying it. Like I
yeah,
do consider it a 5-star read with
mm,
which, I'm not super reserved with giving 5 stars. It doesn't have to be the best book I've ever read, but it's definitely a really enjoyable read, even for someone like me that is typically reading epic and grimdark and stuff. I feel like there's no stakes and it's just like a hug is a little bit overblown in terms of that
yes,
book. Like
yes,
I feel like there are stakes. It's just that the stakes are very personal and
yes,
grounded. I mean, I won't get into any spoilers, but there are even a couple moments that are pretty, like, I'll just say heated, if you get what I mean, Charles. But
yeah,
the
yeah, yeah. I hear you.
like it's not just opening a coffee shop and everyone
Doing
loving
nothing
each
the whole
other
time.
and
Yeah, yeah,
hugs and doing nothing. There are definitely moments of that, and they're enjoyable because the characters are a pleasure, and it's kind of fun to see them open up a coffee shop. But there are very clearly stakes in that, so I'm kind of,
yeah.
I don't know. I
I
feel
agree
like,
completely.
yeah, false advertising, but in a way that was good for me.
Yeah,
Like
I
that
think
made it
it's
better.
not so much false advertising as I think it sells itself a little short in terms
Yeah.
of the content that's in it because I guess going into Legends and Lattes, my experience with cozy fantasy was very minimal. Um, and so when you read it, it's like, oh, it's like a blanket, it's like a hug, it's
Hmm.
so cozy. I'm like, I'm not gonna be challenged at all. Nothing interesting's gonna
Right.
happen. Like that's kind of how I translated it in my head. Um, but that's not the case at all. I mean, if anything, like the main character is like your typical D&D party leader, war hero person who's trying to retire, and all these potential adventures keep swirling around her while she's trying to just exist peacefully in a non-violent way. and a lot of the book is her like being threatened or having to make these choices where she's like, I could resolve these in 2 seconds if I just picked up my sword and clobbered all these people, but
Yeah.
she's trying to hold herself to a new standard, and that to me was fascinating, really interesting. And it was like the perfect pacing, just the right amount of cozy, like, oh, I'll
Hmm.
invent a steamed milk drink and then we'll have biscottis and then I'll hang a sign, and all that stuff was fun too, as someone who was in the cafe scene for a
Yes.
while. So I enjoyed that element of it quite a bit as well. It was just a perfect amount, and then the whole book was kind of shorter, so like you get through the whole thing and it's just perfectly packaged and presented stories. So big fan of that, and I'm sure we'll have more to say about the Travis Baldry extended universe of cozy fantasy in the future, because I am that converted me into a fan. Legends and Lattes did, and I always thought the title was kind of silly too. I think that I kind of was quickly dismissing it based off of that too, and so he totally turned me around and turned me onto the cozy genre, which very impressive days to for me to do a 180 like that. So big fan. You mentioned Red Seas Under Red Skies. I think we're gonna have a full, that was the our friends creating fantasy. We had already done Daughter's War by Christopher Buehlman. That was the first book we picked. The second one was Red Seas Under Red Skies. So we'll do a whole episode dedicated to that. I did hear you talk about it in your solo episode, and I agreed with you. And I
Hmm.
have a lot of points on that I guess we can get into in our full episode. But I will say this: when we read Lies of Locke
Lies of
Lamora,
Locke Lamora.
everyone was telling me, and you made this point in the solo episode, everyone was telling me Locke and Jean, best fantasy duo. And I finished that book and I'm like, I don't fully get it. There must be like, they're
Right.
great characters, but they are not at that time a duo. And I don't know if
Hmm.
people forget that or what, but I mean, they're great partners and like they're good characters. This book like solidifies them as a duo, big time. And so I've got a lot to unpack and say about Red Seas Under Red Skies, because for me it's like it's so close to busting through that excellent threshold, and there's just a couple like things in it that we can talk about that I was like, interesting choices like here and there. I think it like overpromised in its exciting huge twists, which it can be such a hard thing to do, and like he did it so well, and Scott Lynch did it so well in Lies of Locke Lamora, that can be a hard act to follow, and I think he followed it
Yeah.
really well. So there's a lot I really liked about this book. I think it gets a bad rap on some of the negative reviews I see online, but it's not like perfect. It's not as a masterful as the Lies of Locke Lamora, but it was still very good. I enjoyed it. I had so much fun with it. It's been like a year since I read Scott Lynch, and so to get back into his way of writing and his dialogue and his characters, it was really fun. So I had a great time with it. Great time.
I'm glad you did. Yeah, rereading it has been an interesting experience because I was, especially when we read The Lies of Locke Lamora, trying to think of it through the perspective of what it'd be like for you, especially
Yeah.
because Lies of Locke Lamora was one that was fueled by that whole campaign to get you to
Yeah.
read it. That was like
And
the
it had already
most,
been out and celebrated for
yes.
like a decade, so a little late to the party.
So it's years since this has been a narrative at all, but the idea of Charles reading Lies of Locke Lamore and getting his reaction was something that had it was it launched campaigns on social media, a change.org petition that
Yes,
received its share of signatures. So this is when we were
we
way
used to
more
get
active
emails.
online and stuff. Yes,
People would come
emails,
on the
all this
show and
kind of
sandbag
stuff.
me to do, read Lies of Locke Lamora. So, yeah, that was
Right.
a big
So,
moment. So, this series holds a special place in my heart, and I had assumed by the time I finished reading it, I was like, there's got to be more to Locke and Jean in later installments, because you say best fantasy duos question mark, and a million people will break down the door to say Locke and Jean, and I was like, they're a great duo, but I'm not seeing that level. Like I would sooner have gone Royce and Adrian,
Yeah.
but these are these now I see where all the clamor comes from. It was really fun to see these two characters like being that support for each other and helping each other through things, and like really at the end of the day being at each other's backs in like this brotherhood kind of way that I really enjoyed. There were moments that they tried to test it, and I was like, come on, very bizarre. But
Yeah,
overall,
that's
it was very good. And I don't want to
interesting.
get into the
Yeah,
spoilers in
we
this. We'll
will.
have a whole dedicated episode. But that's all I wanted to say about it. It was an excellent book. I love his style. He'll like start a chapter where he's like describing the setting in like the most romantic, beautiful language you can imagine. He's like, the sun was setting gracefully over an emerald sea with the stars glittering like jewels. And then he'll then describe someone like, doing the most crass behavior possible right afterwards, and then okay, now the scene is going, and you're like, oh my gosh, this is classic Scott Lynch. Like he can write the most romantic beautiful language, but he chooses to roll around in the gutter with the rest of us, and that is just so much fun for me.
Oh, yes, very much Lynch core to
Yeah,
be doing that.
yeah.
And I I think all your points are very valid that you've been making about Lies Lockmore and Red Seas Under Red Skies here. Totally valid
Mm,
that Locke and John don't hit their stride until Red Seas Under Red Skies and the next one too. And it can be overlooked, I think, when we're pitching them as the best duo in fantasy, that it's like, wow, you actually have to get through a full lengthy book
mm,
before it
yeah.
even really starts to pick up. Where
Mm,
someone like Royce and Hadrian in Michael Sullivan's series is those two right off the bat like already have that kind of chemistry, and you
right.
can see best why they're the best duo or among the best duos in the first 50 pages or whatever. But I'll say I'm glad you enjoyed it, and I also totally get your critique that you're making about ways in which the Locke and Jean relationship were tested
Mm,
or played as if
yeah.
they were, in a way that is hard to fully buy into in the way maybe Scott Lynch was going for. But I'll
Right.
I'll leave it at that because that's about as close as I'll
Yeah.
get without
We need to
revealing
get
anything
into
in
a
full.
full. We're gonna have a one of our immediate next
Yeah.
episodes will be to talk about this book in detail. But for anyone listening that hasn't read it yet, I highly recommend the series and Scott Lynch. And this book is certainly worth the undertaking. It is really well written, so check it out. Um, Speaking of well written, the next book I had read is The Will of the Many by James. Is it Islington? Islington? I
I've
never
been
looked
saying
up the
Islington, but that's a yeah.
but
Well, I'll seek to double check while you talk about it. I read that one. Was that during hiatus too? I think I did
you
read
had
it during
already
hiatus.
read it, and I decided to pick it up. Like you had, I don't know
Okay.
if we ever,
Or
I
I
don't know if it
was reading
was,
it.
yeah, yeah. I don't know if you had
I
talked about
probably
it on the
finished it during
show before
hiatus.
the hiatus, but um, this is one that is just super, um, like at the time I saw the cover everywhere, super like highly praised, hot fantasy book. So I jumped into this one. I actually read physically, as well on my Kindle, um, and I enjoyed it. I feel like my enthusiasm does not match the average enthusiasm online for like a couple reasons. Like it's funny because he cites Patrick Rothfuss as a huge influence, and I could see that in his story.
Mhm.
And a lot of people, we've defended Patrick Rothfuss like tooth and nail on the whole Mary Sue character, or like, oh, I'm a perfect protagonist that can do everything. And I feel like I could come at James Islington for the same thing I so rigorously defended from Patrick Rothfuss. So I
Well,
feel a
you have
bit
a
hypocritical.
point.
Yeah,
No, I think you have a point.
mm-hmm.
And as someone who literally how much time, so on my move to Miami, I
Yeah,
stopped in Atlanta. My partner, I stopped in Atlanta to
yeah,
spend some time with Charles, his wife, and his
newborn.
newborn
Yep, yep.
infant. So we got to meet her, and We spent how much time there arguing about the will of the many? That
A
was one of
lot,
the main topics.
a
It was like
lot.
the
A-
dangers of AI and the will of the many. And it was, I mean, argument is strong, but about as like butting heads as Charles and I get about a
Yeah, it
book.
was. And Dylan
Yeah.
has a special way of putting me on the defensive, and I'm like, okay, do I really like not like this book as much as I'm like digging myself into this defensive
Charles is
position?
like, this is like a 3 to 4 star book, but then once we get going, he just digs in.
Yeah. So all of a sudden I'm like, no, it's like it's like the whole ending is like this character, he just will go off and practice for 2 weeks and then he'll beat the best person in the room at the thing. As you know, people will maybe die, not die. They go back, snip snap, like in The Office. Just like snip
Is that
snap,
what it
snip
felt
snap.
like?
Is that's what it felt like with some of the back and forth. But again, it was a fun book. I loved the magic system. This idea of
Mhm.
like a what did I call it? It was like those companies that
Pyramid
it's
scheme.
like a pyramid scheme. Exactly. Thank you. It's like a pyramid scheme magic system that's also deeply connected to the government. Brilliant, brilliant. Where people seed their will up the pyramid, and so you get these like few people who are crazy powerful and everyone else is kind of being exploited in a setting where it's like this ancient Rome kind of inspired setting where it's this civilization built off the backs of all of these people too. So there's some really good, like deeply embedded, like when the magic system deeply embeds itself in the culture and the politics, and it's
Hmm.
new and it's different and it's interesting. I loved all of that. It's just the actual like. Then they get to a magic school and they do all the magic school stuff. They have like a Hunger Games kind of competition, and I'm just like, okay, where are we going? We had all this good stuff in the beginning, and now we're like going on a Hunger Games school quest here with a character who's perfect. So it was more of a nitpick that turned into like a staunch defending of like of my position, and I was like, I need to circle back. I did like the book, okay?
That I believe I believe you start like touting yourself as being so brave to offer these criticisms, which was
Well,
an
I
interesting
did feel
choice.
like I'm the,
And also
no one's critical
on an
about it.
island.
I'm throwing
Yeah.
myself out there and be critical of it. I thought it's funny. I praised the politics and the culture, but the setting I kept forgetting it was in this
Mhm.
like Roman inspired setting until they say, "Oh, my tunic or my sandals," and I'm like, "Oh yeah, wait, we're in like a Roman inspired setting." I totally forgot. I don't know, like the way it's written
Mhm.
is so modern and like it almost reads like a dystopian YA sci-fi book that you're like, oh yeah, wait, no, we're in a like a Greek Roman situation here. Everyone's wearing togas and stuff. Like I totally forgot, So just kind of like weird nitpicky stuff like that. But it's only because this book is um so popular. I feel the need to critique it so minutely.
Yeah.
Um,
It's
so it's more of a
it's a
yeah,
I love the book. Yeah, like obviously as we indicated during our argument, I'll say I think the King Killer vibes do a lot for me,
yeah,
and those were apparent for you, Charles. And to circle back to your critique about the Mary Sue of it all, I think the point you were making was that Quoth Rothfuss gets away with a lot because the frame story element of it makes sure you know that Quoth is basically if not a liar, then someone who is very
unreliable
willing
narrator,
to, yeah, stretch the truth
literally.
in a way that makes him an unreliable narrator. And you're getting the story from his own lips, and there's very clear hints, if not explicit, moments in the text where it's like, oh, there are things that Quoth is saying here that don't really align with other people's realities, and he's very willing to, yeah, just stretch the truth to either build his own legend or just tell a good story. And alternatively, you have the will of the many in. present tense with no sort of frame or
First
anything like that.
person.
So, yes, first person present tense. So instead of quote where you can be like, huh, did this actually happen this way? Is he actually this great at this thing? Or is this a moment where he's doing the very clear, unreliable narrator thing? And there's a fun in picking that apart and
Right, right,
examining that. In a first person present tense, with no frame, it's like, I'm doing this right now, and this is exactly how it's happening. So if
right.
you get bothered by the Mary Sue of it all, I I understand it. That's maybe not a trope that bothers me as much as it bothers some other people.
Yeah.
But there's, and I don't think this is like the Mary Stew of all Mary Stews, but I
No.
totally see the
Yeah. It's just
critique.
some points in the plot where it's like, okay, I have to beat the person that's the best, and I have to beat them in like a month. And so he just writes it in a way like I can tell James Islington is like
Oh,
actively
and I
he
think it's Islington
oh
based on
Islington.
I did a
Okay.
quick Google.
Thank you. So I think James Islington is like recognize that was probably a challenge he had a couple times of like how do I get a payoff, a reasonable payoff for this. And like there's a fight
Hmm.
scene in the beginning where it's excellent, where he beats someone way stronger than him,
Yeah.
right? Like so it's like that was fun. And he does throughout present reasons why things are happening. So it's not like totally unwarranted. It's just to me like okay, like maybe this could have happened over a longer period of time. Maybe that we could set this up a different way. Like we got to give ourselves something because he's like the most perfect. The other thing is like when you have a preteen who's also just like super level headed and always makes the
He's
right
not a
choice.
preteen.
Well, he's what 18 or something. Okay, not preteen, but
That would make him 18,
so you have a
not a
teenager.
preteen.
Okay,
You're picturing
even
this like
someone in their
11 year
early
old.
even in their early
Yes,
20s,
no,
all
I
right, okay,
your point is
18,
valid, but
like he's the most emotionally stable, mature, like forward thinking, progressive person in the world. And you know it's like again he's the hero, whatever. Like I totally like in fantasy, if you can't do that in fantasy, I don't know where you can. So I'm like, I'm totally like, it's not like that's why I didn't like the book or anything. I liked the book, but it's just all these things compounding together. I was like, I could have used a little bit of some flaws would make this character more interesting, you know. But his flaws that he cares too much, I guess. But I want to keep going
there's
because I
the
have a ton of
classic,
books here.
yeah, we'll let it go, but it's a classic, like, but he's like too cocky about his skills and he's brash, and that's like a quoth
Yeah,
flaw
yeah.
too. But there's a little bit of my greatest, like, my weakness is actually a strength job interview element to
Yeah,
that, but like I'm actually just really courageous. But go on,
yeah.
sorry.
It's hard
Well,
to see it as a
yeah,
weakness when he
we're
actually does
spending a
like
lot of time on
use that
Will
to
of the
win
Many.
plenty of times. But anyway, it sounds like we need to do an episode on the Will of the
Yeah,
Many
I
too,
think so.
because the next one I read, I don't have too much to say. It was funny because this was like one of the first books I was reading, like after my daughter was born. It was like one of the first ones, and it's the Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros, and
Yeah.
I had been on the wait list for this one for the library for months. So when it came up, I was like, "This is I have to read this now. Like I can't wait." And it was like a graphic audio production, which it wasn't
Interesting.
abridged or anything, but every character had a different voice actor, and sometimes they'd play like intense music or like wind blowing. Like there was a challenge in the beginning where they're really high up and they have to like jump through stuff. It's like I'm trying to jump but I can't reach it. You know, so it's very like graphic audio stuff, and that was kind of like interesting, I suppose, fun for a change. Um, not what I'm used to, but it was good. I mean, it was a fun story. I could see why it was popular, is popular. Will I read the next one? Unlikely, but I did like it. You know, it is what it is, and I can see
I
why.
did an episode like on Fourth Wing, I think,
Well,
where
there
there's
you.
like a quick spoiler review one. Wait, you were there, Charles, way back, I
Yes, I
think.
was there. I was there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
So it's yeah. I guess I've said more than enough on it, so you can check that out if you want my opinion when it was way fresher. But I just want to say, isn't there a character? I'm trying to remember now.
mhm.
I thought maybe you'd be
Go
amused by
ahead.
this as well. There's like a random character. I think their power is that they can like breathe underwater or something. It's like something like that, and they just like never. It's never utilized. Like they're just like this random ass character, and they're just like, yeah, my power is like to breathe underwater, and they're like, oh, that's great. Whatever your
It's
name
like
is, like
Aquaman. It's like,
go, yeah, it's like, but that has no relevance to our world or situations ever. So
yeah,
like
there's a
that's cool.
character. I think their name was like, and their name was like Heaton or something. But yeah,
Yes,
there
that's
was a
right.
character
They
who could breathe underwater, yeah, and so that's
yeah.
kind of fun. I mean, it was fun. Like dragon riding is cool, and the link is cool. The romance to me, like we read Court of Thorns and Roses. I have another book coming up with these kind of romances. They're just I just like. I think they're funny now. You know, I'm reading this and I'm like, oh, I love you so much, and that's why I can't love you right now. It's the thing. It's
The
like it's
freaking
classic.
nickname that the love interest gives to the main character, and I won't say because I guess that could be a spoiler for someone who hasn't read it, but that nickname is so cringy.
Right. But this is a
But it
character
is
where
fun. It
she's
is
like the
fun.
underdog, and I think the
Except
way
she's also amazing at everything,
she's
and
also amazing at
you want your
everything,
Mary Sue criticism, I think
but there
Fourth
are
Wing
elements to it that I
deserves it.
liked. And there was this dynamic where she had another love interest and she's like, stop trying to protect me. And it's like, but you could literally die at any moment because you're weaker than everyone else, yeah, until you're not.
Except she's not.
So
Yeah,
but
except she's not at every point that matters. But
yeah, but
let's
you know, it's fun. I mean, why not? You
it
know.
is fun. It's entertaining. I read it pretty quick when I read it. Like you just find uh, the pages moving. But
Yep.
let's keep the pages moving here, Charles.
Great. Well
And I
said.
know
This
you've got
one is kind of
another. Yeah.
interesting. I was, you know, every once in a while I go through my local bookstore and they have like a used book section that I check out. And I came across this series of covers that just blew my mind. No, knowing nothing about the series, I'll show you. This is Dave Edding. This was the first book, The Diamond
Oh
Throne,
yeah.
and then it was a trilogy and they had all the books lined up. This is another
Wow.
one.
Check out the YouTube, folks,
Check out
and
the YouTube. I
subscribe.
mean, it's a cool illustration, and these
Ring that
books.
bell.
Here's the other one. Like this is like your old
Sapphire
school
Rose.
kind of
Yeah, this
pulpy
is
sci-fi, like
yeah.
not sci-fi, but like you know sci-fi fantasy kind of stuff. And I don't know, the covers just spoke to
Sword
me.
and sorcery.
Exactly. And it's from like the late 80s. And these books are so fresh. It's like the spine is like, I guarantee you these have never been read. They were bought new, never read, on a shelf. Like they were just in great condition.
Yeah, they
So
look gorgeous.
they look gorgeous. And I was like, you know, I had
Though
read,
of their time for sure. But there's a
yeah.
charm when
You
the
know when
book
they
looks
make
like an
fun of the
80s
male
pulpy book.
fantasy author and they're like, she breasted boobily. I think that's what's happening in
And
this.
also the armor that is like form right. She's got an armor, right? If
It's
I'm
like a
seeing it.
course.
No,
She's
no,
like a
it's a
queen,
dress.
so she's
Okay,
wearing
never
like a
mind. Never
corset. But
mind.
yeah, it's ridiculous, you
I
know.
thought it was the armor that like is very form fitting to like a woman wearing armor that somehow
This is her
has like
royal court dress. What are
distinctive.
you talking about?
Yes, no,
She's
that
in
no, I
state.
see it.
She's
I
working
see
in
it.
state right
It's
now, you
she's in
know.
a dress.
Yeah, so
Yeah, no,
I
it's
mean, it
fair. It's
looks
fair.
great, like hand drawn stuff. You just don't really see that much these days of its time. But then, of course, like I don't need to see like the half naked woman on the cover. This one is particularly fun. You know, it's just like really cool. Like, yeah, let's just see some dude fight some monster for a while. And
Yeah.
so that's what I decided to do. I read The Diamond Throne, which is the first one. And you know, it's definitely of its time, but there's something to be said to going back to like not exactly a Tolkien clone, but very much like here's a quest, we're the good guys, go do the quest, stuff happens, quest complete. You know, it's just like there was something kind of fun about that return to form for me anyway. And David Eddings, I've read some other of his stuff. It is very like old school fantasy of like knights and dragons and you know queens and elves and all this stuff. So um you know, it was fun. I mean, there's definitely some dated stuff in here. There's like a moment where the main character is a knight and
Hmm.
he's got this like squire character And the Squire character had a child out of wedlock, and he goes to the our main character and he's like, I hope you don't think of me differently. It was a weak moment. Like, I still love my wife, this and that. And the main character's like, bro, don't worry about it. It happens all the time. Like, totally understandable. And you're like, wow, that
Mm.
is so wild. That is like not something that I think readers would agree with in this day and age. It had a little bit of that, but it was still at the end of the day a fun. I'm a knight. There's some magic. I'm going around D&D style doing quests. I enjoyed it. Um, and will I finish it? Maybe someday. But I am excited to have these like on the gorgeous things.
Yeah, they're charming when a book looks like an 80s pulpy fantasy
Yeah,
novel and it actually is an 80s pulpy fantasy novel, there's a charm to those covers.
yeah,
When they look like that now, like a book comes out now that looks like that, it's like this is like a terrible cover, but it looks great, like you said,
yeah.
hand drawn and all
And it
that kind
even
of stuff.
opens with like the origin story of a diamond that gets broken into shards, and they have to go and collect them, and it makes a ring. Oh my god, like that kind of stuff. But it was just fun.
That's
It was just
funny.
fun. We'll just hop right over the Devils because we're gonna do a whole episode
Yes.
on it. But just to say that this was a lot of fun. I look forward to talking
Hmm.
about it. But I read this one afterwards, and this was great. Lots of stuff to
The
say
last
about it.
20% is super strong, I
It
think,
yeah, it's very fun, and it's
and
kind of
very
good to see him write an
Abercrombian.
ensemble cast where like there was ensemble cast moments in the first law, and there were some of our favorites, the Fellowship of the Seed and all that. So to make
Yeah.
that the entire book was a lot of well. So we'll get more into that. Wind and Truth by Brandon Sanderson. I have a lot to
Oh
say about
no,
the
Charles.
Cosmere
Oh
as
no.
well. I know. I'm not going to get into it because I think I have another whole thing on this, but this was one that, again, I was on the wait list for months at the library. It becomes available. This audiobook is over 60 hours long, and you can only rent the book for like 20 days or something. And so I got nowhere close to finishing it. And it was like, day 19, 1 day left, and I'm like maybe 20, 30 hours in, which normally would have finished 99% of books. And I'm like, I, I just can't. I need to take a break. Like, I, I don't even fully process what's happening. It's the Stormlight archives have just gone beyond. It's going down a path I can't follow right now. It's just too big, and I don't want to stop Sanderson from doing his thing. I can tell he's never been happier than when he's writing Stormlight Archive and adding crap to the Cosmere. But for me, it's like, and this is someone who read all of his like COVID standalone books. Like I've read a lot of Sanderson. I am just that was not a great reading experience for me. I'm just going to take a break and come back to it when I'm ready. That's all I'm going to say. And I'm starting to see sentiment on Wind and Truth kind of mirroring that.
Mm.
People are like, I've hit my threshold for as much as I can take straight to the dome of the Stormlight Archive. It's a lot. It is a lot.
That's interesting that you've been noticing that sentiment. I didn't know that
I
was
see it on like our
popping up.
fantasy all the time. People are like, what's going on? I
Interesting.
mean, he's still like Sanderson is still beloved, icon and all that, but this is the first time I've seen anything even remotely critical. Has been
Mm.
through Wind and Truth, and it's not even bad. It's one of those things where it's like kind of a lot. I think so.
Yeah, it's interesting when you're telling me about this. I think when we're talking I don't remember. It doesn't matter. Point being, you're telling me about this, and you have an interesting episode idea that
Yeah,
we'll see where we
mhm.
end up going with that. But
And you haven't picked this one up
I
yet.
I haven't picked.
Mhm.
No, it's gonna be in the near future. I have a hard time thinking I'll quit on it the way that it feels like you.
But I didn't have a
I know you're more of
choice.
in the
Like,
Ross from Friends situation here. He's like, we were on a
yeah,
break kind of thing, but I. You're gonna just see some other books in the meantime, and we'll see how
yeah,
Rachel slash Brandon Sanderson feels about that
right.
when you come crawling back. But I'll say I have a hard time imagining it'll be that much of a hit for me, but I did have a little bit of the experience I think you're describing with the most recent, like, second era Mistborn book, where they've really
Okay,
started to integrate, like, Sanderson really started to integrate all of these Cosmere elements from everything going on. And I was like, okay, like, this is getting a little, like, I've read almost all these books and I'm like struggling to follow everything. So I could
right.
see Stormlight starting to go that way. I don't know. I'm interested. I'll see where I go, but
Yeah,
we'll expand
a
on this,
lot
or
to
at
say
least you
about
will
the
in a
like
future
the
episode.
Cosmere has been around, decades now, and it's kind of it's interesting to watch how it's changed over time and how Sanderson's style has changed over time. And I think there's something to
Hmm.
be said about where we're at with it today, and how the reading experience has evolved over time. So definitely something worth getting into. I read Blood Song by Anthony Ryan, which I was
Ah, I
super
love
excited
Blood Song.
about.
Yeah.
Anthony Ryan has been one of my top authors that I have never read before on my TBR. Really, eager to get into some of his work, and I enjoyed this one. This is again like another like quest fantasy thing off to the school. Told like he's telling the story back to a scribe, like all that
Hmm.
stuff that I really enjoy. The school element was interesting because they're like young boys when they're brought in, and so there's this like indoctrination process that's happening, and it's of all the schools that I've read in these 12 books, and there's a lot of them, this one was the most brutal for sure. I mean, Fourth Wing people died, but not quite like this. Not quite like this. This is like, these are like preteens when they start out, and they get killed, so, and in brutal ways, exposure, they get wounded in battle, like they get dismembered by animals and stuff, like all these crazy crazy things are happening in this in Blood Song by Anthony. So I enjoyed it. It's a classic, um fantasy adventure. It was well structured. um it's fun to have some of the magic in there as well as sword fighting. So I was a fan, and you had read this one too, Dylan, right?
A while ago. I freaking love that book. It's one of my recommendations for fans of King Killer because of the frame story element of it. And
Yeah,
there's definitely elements of the, I don't know, prodigy is the best word for it, but that kind of thing where character is very strong and works
yeah,
toward that and all that kind of stuff. But it's a very different book from King Killer in a lot of ways too, and that more gritty, darker aspect to it. But that's a book I very fondly remember reading, and then was like so disappointed by the second one. I
um
don't know. So I don't
I
know. Maybe I'll go back to that at some point. But there's a,
interesting. I
yeah, they
kind
kind of
of
move away from the. uh, They add point of view, at least one point of
oh
view
mm,
character, and it's like it's just not the same. But I love Blood
interesting.
Song. Highly recommend that to
Yeah, I
everyone.
kind of
Sounds like
walked
you do
away
too.
from Bloodsong being like, I'm good. I'm interested in, different things from Anthony Ryan now, but it was as a standalone reading experience very strong, and it has something for everybody. It's
Yeah.
got military battles, it's got intrigue, it's got magic, it's got, espionage,
Hmm.
prophecy stuff.
It's
Like
got it all.
it's got it all, and it works. So I read Somewhere Beyond the Sea by T.J. Klune, and this
Hmm.
one, kind of tops the list for me, which surprised me. I I think House in the Cerulean Sea, we covered that one on the show, and that was again some early cozy fantasy exposure. And we were like, it was really sweet, really great characterization, funny, you know, all that good stuff. But overall, relatively like, it I don't want to say surface level, because certainly there's stuff going on, but it was definitely like a feel good kind of story. And this one is a little more challenging, a little more gloves off, like let's go. And it really is about, it's the same characters. It's a sequel to House in the Cerulean Sea, but it's about, when you live in a world where the government is against you because of your like how you were born, in this case, children with magic. And honestly, that's, because this society's pretty modern, mirrors modern day a lot, except for the fact that there's people that can be born with like X-Men like powers. And so they're trying to monitor these children who have seemingly extraordinary powers where they're capable of doing severe damage even though they're sweet little kids, right? So when the government's working against you and you have to work within a corrupt government system, and that's what this book is about. And I think it rings true for a lot of people, especially in like the trans community. Is what TJ Klune wrote this book for directly. It says it in the beginning of the book that this is for trans people. And so it's imagining just like here's a government where people are scoring points by being totally unfair, unkind, cruel to you, and you have to still somehow exist in that world. And it was challenging and it was fun. And the audiobook I highly recommend. That I don't have the name of the narrator in front of me, but he put it all out there in a lot of scenes. Because in this book he's having like anxiety and panic attacks and second thoughts and doubts, and all of that is translated. So, and it still has a lot of that humor, and it's the same great characters. It does this interesting thing that I love in books still, and that reminds me of The Magicians, where they
Mm.
totally swap POVs. So in the first book, we got Lioness, and in this book, we get Arthur. And so you see Linus is totally like in the back seat. His page count's relatively low. And so it's kind of
Mhm.
fun to see how like you can evolve your characters that way by just switching POVs and letting them be a side character, and then the scenes where they come in have that impact. I love when authors can work with their character like that. Joe Abercrombie does it in his standalones. The Magicians does it
Mhm.
really well. This is another one that I think was a really good use of that kind of um, POV shift. We see a character outside of them completely through the eyes of another character. Because Linus was full of self doubt, doesn't think he's that
Mhm.
great, and you know feels like he's intruding on this family that's been established, right? He's kind of coming in later, and then to have Arthur see him in a totally different way was super rewarding. So anyone who's a fan of House of the Cerulean Sea, highly recommend Somewhere Beyond the Sea. um, so I know we got to wrap it up here, so I'm going to jump through some of these really quickly. Here's one that I think many people would be surprised that I read. I read Twilight because you guys have to understand that the library totally controls what I read now, and it was just one of the ones I'd put on hold. I put a bunch of stuff on hold, and when it becomes available, I read it. Twilight was one of them.
I, I love this attempt to completely take any
I
responsibility
will
away
take
from the fact that you fully read
I
a book.
no
Like
no
you read the book, Charles.
I did read it, but I this is why I read it. I put it on hold because it was one of those books that I can't go with my whole life without reading. This was a book that was a huge cultural moment. We
You
were of
could.
age
Many
when that.
people go their whole lives without reading
Yeah,
Twilight.
but we're professionals, and I just wanted to know what was going on because I read freaking Court of Thorns and Roses. I've read Fourth Wing at this point. This is kind of a continuation of that study of that genre of fantasy, and I can see like Court of Thorns and Roses and Fourth Wing. They stand on the shoulders of Twilight. Man, Twilight created like the perfect young adult teen romance with Edward Cullen, where he's 17, but he's also a vampire that's over 100 years old, and so you get that balance of he's young and hot, but he's also super mature and he's into me, So it's like the perfectly contrived boyfriend that I was like, this is genius, Stephanie Meyer crafted that perfect relationship. And there's this line I just couldn't get over the age gap, though. I don't think I'm alone in that. There's a line in the
Yeah.
book where Bella is just realizing that Edward is a vampire, and she's asking him a ton of questions. And one of her questions is, "So, how old are you?" He goes, 17. And then listen to this. She goes, "How long have you been 17?" And he goes, "A long time." And you're just like, oh, God. On what world would an immortal vampire, even though they're 17, have any interest in a high school girl? I don't know. But
Immortal vampires only only hang out with 17-year-old girls for one thing, and it's disgusting.
exactly,
That's it's
exactly,
like
bro, exactly. So that was interesting. But I will say, like, if my when my daughter becomes a preteen and reading YA stuff, I'd be more than happy for her to read Twilight. There's a lot in there that I find interesting, and I like her dynamic. I like a good high school story, and it's kind of true to the high school experience. She moves to a new school, so
was your high school experience was a lot like
nothing
uh
like that.
what's
No,
what's it, Bella, is that
Bella,
her
yeah, yeah.
Bella? You
So
you saw a lot of your high school experience in that?
no, but it did feel like an honest high school experience, so I appreciated that. They talk about cars and boys, and they're doing homework, and
Those are all things relevant to high
But
school.
yeah, yeah. Will I be reading the rest of them? No, I did my due diligence, and I'm moving on to the next YA preteen romantasy whatever book. Who knows what that is? I don't know. But working through them. Let's see. One of the last ones I read was Howl's Moving Castle, which was the source material for the Studio Ghibli film of the same name. That was a
Great
lot of
movie.
fun. I actually really enjoyed that story, and it inspired me to watch the movie a second time. The movie makes a lot of changes to Howl specifically, and a couple other, like, it changes the themes. But for the most part, it stays true to these characters, and these characters are really fun. There's Calcifer, the fire demon, who's kind of resigned through some sort of spell to be in the fireplace of this moving castle, and it's just a fun story scenario. Calcifer is such a good character where he's a fire demon who can do all kinds of crazy magic, but he's also concerned about the rain, and he doesn't like when you cook breakfast on him, but he'll still let you cook breakfast on him because they're like a family and they need to eat breakfast, right? So it's just those fun, like, found family kind of moments in there with these three interesting characters. And if you've seen the movie, I recommend reading the book. It's a different enough experience that you can appreciate both. I had a really good time. I didn't realize it was a book, honestly, until I saw it in my feed, and I was like, "Is this really the book? Was it the source material?" And then I was like, "Okay, this is true."
Mm.
So I'm gonna check it out. And yeah, it gives a lot of. I feel like Studio Ghibli movies, especially Howl's Moving Castle, like, they don't try to explain what's happening too much. So if you're someone that likes to understand more about what the heck was happening during that movie, the book goes into some deeper detail there. So really fun, like, classic fairy tale kind of story there. So I actually highly recommend it. It was fun. It's not that long either. You've seen the movie, right, Dylan?
I've seen the movie. Yeah, great movie. I just love those Studio Ghibli movies in
It it
general. I
is.
I
It
think I
reads like
pretty
great
much
source material.
enjoyed every one that I've watched. So, uh, is that one my top? It's probably like top 4 or 5,
Yeah.
and yeah,
Yeah, I'd say
but
it's probably,
it's
maybe for me. I haven't seen a lot of them, but it's in my top three. And I'm sure if there's some heavy hitters I haven't seen, so it
mm,
reserves the chance to move. But nothing beats Spirited Away, in my opinion. So
yeah, Spirited Away is a
that's the
classic,
number one.
and Princess Mononoke, especially for fantasy fans, I feel like
Yep.
is another top one.
Yep.
I really enjoyed the more recent one too. I can't remember the name of it. The Boy and the
Oh
Heron,
yeah, yeah.
or the
Boy and the Heron.
what's it? Yeah, okay,
Yep. Yep.
yeah, that
Yeah,
was good too.
I own that
I
one.
don't know. I'd have
Beautiful.
to think if I were ranking, but yeah, Charles, cool you read that one. I think my partner loves Studio Ghibli, and I think she would
You should read the book
she would get a lot of joy out of
because
the
I
book.
really
She
enjoyed.
Howl's is probably one of her favorites too.
I really enjoyed reading the book and then going right back and watching them again. Like, I
Hmm.
had a lot of fun doing it, so I would highly recommend it. The last book, as I know we got to wrap it up here, is the last one I read, Station 11 by Emily St. John Dillon. This
Ah,
is one you had hyped up
love it,
years
love it.
ago on the
Yeah.
show. Early recommendation from you in the early days of FTF, and I finally got my hands on it, and wow, like, it was so interesting. This book was written in 2014, and it's about a mass pandemic. And so, like, depending on when you've read it and your experience with it, you can connect with it in so many different ways. But so much of
Right.
it is about this string of characters. It's told non-linear, and somehow all these characters are end up being crossing paths at some point, and it goes from right before this pandemic hits to 20, 30 years post pandemic, and it just bounces around. And as a society that's recently gone through such a thing, you develop a connection to this book in a way that maybe the author didn't originally anticipate, but she's so
Definitely could
good
not
at
have.
touching on elements of humanity in this book,
Hmm.
where you've got characters who have experiences with this pandemic in so many different ways. Like, and the same character will go through a range of emotions. They'll connect nostalgically, they'll look back with anger, they'll look back with like sadness, and they go through all those emotions, and you can feel that way with them too. It was a little intense, not gonna lie, a little triggering to go through a whole pandemic thing, and he's mass buying food at the grocery store, and like there's all this misinformation, and people are watching other people panic and not sure how to react. It's like stuff that maybe hits a
Hmm.
little too close to home these days, but the payoff was like a really well written introspective story, and her writing style is like so minimal, where she'll do a sentence where she'll be like, she looked up at the sky and remembered the taste of an orange that she hadn't had in 20 years.
Hmm.
And the next line will be, then she sharpened her knife and tucked it back under her shirt. And just like she'll move like that, and it's almost poetic in a way, because there's a lot she leaves unspoken, and it makes it super impactful. And then she hits you with like 10 of them. Like each sentence could
Hmm.
be its own chapter, is how I feel like sometimes when she gets in that particular mood. She'll write a sentence that could serve as a chapter, and then you move on. So I was very, very impressed by Emily St. John. I think of all the books I've read, this was the most like literary of them all by a long
Hmm.
shot, and it was the one I just finished. So I feel a special um, connection to it. Very well written, very good story, and I know you have a lot of similar feelings.
For sure. And I'll say I read it, I think just a few months before the actual
That's the worst
pandemic.
time.
So
The
it
worst
was, I
time.
think, the worst time because in, and this is not a spoiler,
You're
this is like
thinking
the
you're about to
premise of
join
the
a
book.
traveling circus, in an
Right. It's
abandoned
like
airport.
in Emily St. John Mandel's world, the Georgian flu, it starts as something that's like you're kind of overhearing. You're like, oh, that's happening somewhere, but it wouldn't come here. It wouldn't happen to us. And I feel like that was the vibe for a lot of people when COVID first started like
Mm.
popping up in the news, and echoes of the like swine flu scare that never was. and
Yeah, yeah.
and then I was hearing those things. I was like, I've seen this. I've seen where this goes, at least in literature. And then it was
I
like
can
freaking
imagine.
me out a little bit as
Yeah, no
I was
crap.
like, this is how it starts. And then the premise is that like 99.8% or something like that of humanity gets wiped out. So I was
Everything's
definitely freaking
lost.
out with
All
COVID.
science and technology
Obviously, COVID
becomes
didn't
gone.
completely,
Mm.
yeah, didn't completely wipe things the way that the Georgian flu did in this book, but definitely freaked me out. I'll say that the, and you touched on this a bit,
Mm.
Emily St. John Mandel's writing, besides a beautiful prose and all this kind
Mm.
of stuff, the thing that sticks out is I don't think there's a single author I would say writes normal people as realistically as she does.
Mm.
The and I called it something like real core or norm core, because it's like there's certain characters like a, let's say, Joe Abercrombie. He writes characters that feel real, but these are wacky people, right? Like
Yeah,
wacky, like
yeah,
let's say Glockta or Logan Ninefit. Like they feel real. You feel like you know them. They're really well written, but they're not just like random ass normal people.
yeah.
And I feel like Emily St. John Mandel writes the experience of like random ass normal people in the most real way I've really
Yeah, yeah.
seen. I can't think of who would compare even. She's just got that gift.
Yeah, especially in a modern era setting too, because I feel like also fantasy characters, like I'm thinking of like Robin Hobb does humanity really well in characters and things, but it's a
Hmm.
fantasy, it's a like a medieval era fantasy thing. There's still a little bit of disconnect there, but these are like
Well, yeah,
literally
they're still
present.
like pirates and crap,
Yeah,
It's like
right.
they're still like sociopathic
Yeah,
pirates,
yeah, yeah, exactly. But
So
this is like
that's where,
modern day,
right,
present
just
American
real
human
real
beings, and
people.
some are Canadian and some are
Yeah,
whatever. But it's just like modern
some are
day.
Canadian.
We won't
does
hold it
that
against
does
them
that
because I
yeah
said
does that
American. I don't want people to think like that. I think every character in that story is American. I recognize that, but it takes place like mostly in Michigan and some in Canada. So that area, but yeah, it was to your point, like it was about humanity, and in order to achieve that, she really dove into what makes people human and how do we connect with them, so that when things get taken away from them, whether it's loved ones or technology or society or opportunity or whatever, um, you feel for them in a very personal way. And so like I thought that was really well executed. The only minor hang up that I have, and I don't even know if you could call it a criticism, is that so much technology was lost so fast I almost don't believe it. Of like we lost technology, like technology's just gone. No electricity, like we couldn't get electricity back in the first 10 years, like solar panels, nothing, like all that was just spectacularly lost. You gotta suspend your disbelief there a little bit, because the whole point of the story is what if that stuff was gone. So
Hmm.
you got to allow that to happen.
And what would be preserved
But
about
as like a
humanity and what we care
pandemic
about?
survivor
I
here, I couldn't help but be a
Yes.
little critical. And they didn't mention panic, like he panic bought water, Winkies. He did not panic buy toilet. So fake stuff.
Right,
I should have
exactly.
tossed the book in the bin right in those first couple chapters,
Right,
but
for sure.
I persevered. So that's it, Dylan. Those are all the books I read. There's a couple more that aren't fantasy related. Those are the books that I have covered over the break, and some that are going to lead to a lot of really interesting future episodes on the Friends Talking Fantasy podcast, because we are so back.
Yeah, we are back again in
Here.
parentheticals. So I'm pumped, Charles. I've been holding down the fort, but it's
You've been a great
there's
steward of the show. Appreciate you holding it down.
there's something special though about OG Friends Talking Fantasy, just you and me on a Zoom call and doing the thing we've been doing since the days of the pandemic and
2020, yeah.
on it, yeah,
It's
the
not
pandemic.
Shakespeare, but it's close enough.
Right, it's not. I don't know if it's close enough, but it is something that I love to do, and it means a lot to have you back. So let's see. I think
Let's
this time
see.
we can sustain a little
How
more
back are we
effectively
to
our
be
return.
determined? But we've
Right,
got some
everyone's
episodes
like,
prepared. We're starting early this time. We're recording some stuff. We're
yeah.
getting ahead. So the chances of more episodes of us coming out regularly are pretty good. Not guaranteed, but pretty good. So
The listeners and viewers, I think at this point, take a grain of salt with every "We're Back" episode.
but who
At
doesn't
this
love a good
point,
"We're Back"
but
episode? Those are
oh,
classics. So
they are classics. We have like three of them.
and the other good thing about me being back, beyond these beautiful borders and the intro music, is the sweet, sweet outro music. Isn't that right, Dylan?
That's exactly right, Charles. So get that sweet, sweet outro music pumping.
Here we go. Thank you, everyone, one and all, for listening to yet another very exciting episode of the Friends Talking Fantasy podcast. If you like what you heard today, if you want to support the show, the best places to do that, I guess, are over on YouTube these days. We're really trying to grow that YouTube channel, so make sure you go watch. I was showing off some covers earlier. You're not going to be able to, get the full show experience these days without checking us out over on YouTube at Friends Talking Fantasy. And then, Dylan, what else can they do to support the show?
toss 5 stars to our podcast, which you can do over on Spotify. You can also do it on Apple Podcasts, where you can rate and review. As Charles mentioned, subscribing to the YouTube channel, ringing that bell, that's a big thing that we're pushing nowadays, and we think that's the best place to enjoy our content now. So I'll also say, geez, Charles, like, when was the last time we did one of these? I'm like rusty on.
I know. I was like, I know I have a transition.
Like, what are my lines again? I'm like,
but just listen.
Yeah, I talk about social media at the FTF Podcast 1 on X. Yeah, sure. At the FTF Podcast on Instagram and TikTok. I think Instagram's probably the closest to what I'm actually active on nowadays. But you don't have to do any of that, because just watching or listening is more than enough. Thank you so much for doing that.
Yes, well said, Dylan. Just listening, so much more than enough. Thank you guys for coming, listening, watching. Thank you. And as always, go forth and conquer, friends.